Thank you for joining me for episode number 5 of the Next Bite of Life podcast. My name is Kem. Today we're going to talk about a visit to Marrakesh, that wonderful exotic city that's in Morocco in North Africa. We spent a total of 7 days there and 6 nights, and it was absolutely marvelous. We probably could have spent another few days discovering more of the city, but unfortunately, we only had 1 week. So I hope to share with you some of the reasons why we think you should visit it and maybe put it on your bucket list. Morocco has a very long and turbulent history, and it's had various rulers. It was captured at several times by the Almoravids, which were the first settlers and the first rulers. It was founded in 1070 by them, and it was named as the capital of the empire from 1147. They ruled until 1269 when the Marinids captured Marrakesh. And so they relocated the capital to Fez, and they neglected Marrakesh, the poor thing. Anyway, later on, the Sadians captured Marrakesh, and they relocated the capital right back to Marrakesh. So you see, there's always been this it's not friendly, this political grab and resentment between Marrakesh and Fez. And you'll probably understand why eventually Rabat was chosen as the capital of Morocco, because that was a way of deflecting hate from either side. So basically one couldn't prove to be superior to the other one. The Atlas Mountains of Marrakesh actually was the determining factor as to who controlled the city of Marrakesh. Because basically, if you controlled the mountains, you could seal off Marrakesh from the Sahara Desert. And so there was no salt or gold or any of the trading going on. So you could basically cut them off. They always wondered why at that point there was no wall built around the city so that they could so they could defend themselves better from their enemies. It was actually the Emir Ben Youssef who launched a grand plan, and he built a huge palace, and he wanted to make Marrakesh a lot grander than it was. And a lot of the designs in Marrakesh were Andalusian, actually. The Emir Ben Youssef built cisterns so that they could bring water into the city from the Atlas Mountains. And the irrigation was much better, so they grew a lot of olive trees. And he also built one of the largest mosques. Actually, it was the largest mosque in the empire at that point. And he made the city in such a way that it would attract a lot of merchants. The first ones to appear in Marrakesh were the tanners. They worked with Moroccan leather, and even till now, the Moroccan leather is still considered one of the most luxurious and the finest quality of leather. So they were put towards the east of the city so that the smell of the leather and the use of the water, they wouldn't bother the regular folks. The next people to appear there towards the north were the rich people, and they built this wonderfully huge riads that were in the Andalusian style. That's when you have like the inner fountain and the garden. Like there's an inner courtyard, and the house is like built in a square, and all the rooms overlook the central courtyard. So there were a lot of olive growers and people with vineyards who lived in Marrakesh at that point, and they were the next settlers to come in. Also at that point, the Jewish people were not allowed to live in Marrakesh, and I'm not sure why. They were allowed to trade there though, but they couldn't live there. So there was basically a Jewish quarter that was set up outside of the city limits. The first walls were built in Marrakesh about the 1120s. The mosques were razed. All the mosques were actually burnt down because, the silliest reasons ever. They were burnt down because they were not aligned properly. They were a few degrees off their alignment to Mecca, which is like the golden city of Islam. So basically, they burned them all down, and they were actually rebuilt. Actually, the leader of the empire did not even step foot in the city because he thought it was not a good thing to do because of the alignment of the mosques. The Kutubia Mosque, which is the symbol of Marrakesh, and you'll find that on the website nextbiteoflife.com. It's the very first picture, is actually the second mosque that was built on that ground, because the first one was torn down because of its misalignment to the... I just don't know how these people had time to do all these things and worry about how many degrees they were to Mecca. But anyway, the first one was turned down and burnt, and it was the son that actually built the second one, and he put the minaret there and the gate of the Medina, which enclosed all the harems and the palaces and the treasures. And the Almoravids also expanded the cistern, the water from the Atlas Mountains. And that's why two of the things actually were the Menara Gardens and the Agdal Gardens, which were a couple of the places that we visited. It was thanks to Ben Youssef, who changed all that and made the Menara Gardens what it is today, basically. You'll find that the minaret of the Kutubian is actually a twin of the minaret that's in the Seville's Giralda, the cathedral, which I've seen, and it's beautiful, and we'll talk about that at some other point. And also the minaret that's in the tower in Rabat in Morocco is also, so you could call it a triplet even, because there's actually 3 designs of it that kind of look the same. And when you think about the Giralda and the influence that it had on a lot of churches over the years, like the Red Square, the churches in the Red Square in Moscow are basically modeled after the Giralda, and even a lot of the ones in Eastern Europe, for instance, also. So you can see that, the influences of this people went, far and wild, and far and wide also. Anyway, there always was a lot of power struggles with Marrakesh. I mean, you think about how they didn't consider the city. A lot of the emirs didn't consider the city beautiful. So they would either capture it, burn it down, or move it to Fez, move the capital to Fez. So it went back and forth. When the ultimate struggle, I'm trying to remember everything that the guard told us, because we did a guided tour. He told us about the Caliph of Seville, whose name was Abdul al-Walid, and he ruled until 1232. And his widow tried to have his son succeed him, and in exchange for the people's backing him, she promised to hand over Marrakesh to them. And the people of Marrakesh heard about this, and they ended up making their own deals. And they had to pay a cash price of 500,000 dinars to keep the city and keep it away from the clutches of the widow of the Caliph in Seville. So the internal struggle led to the loss of Andalusia. And so that's when they were ultimately separated. Before that, they had quite the history together. And actually, one of the places, like the Menara Gardens that we saw, it has a huge reservoir with the water drawn from the Atlas Mountains. And one of the tests, if you wanted to fight and be a soldier and fight in Sevilla and Andalusia, you had to swim the length of this reservoir. And if you've seen it, it's just wide. I mean, it's humongously long. So that was one of the tests they had to go through to be able to join the Andalusian army. I don't think I could have done that anyway. Well, we saw a lot of, we saw the Sadian tombs, which is just magnificent. The tile work and the grandness of the place was just absolutely mind-boggling. The Sadians arrived in Marrakesh to help with the jihad against the Portuguese invaders around 1515. And the leader, his name was Al-Qiyam. He helped Marrakesh defeat the invaders, and after his death, his son Ahmad moved his body back to Marrakesh, and and he buried him in the Sadian tombs. And he had been invited there by his father-in-law, who he ended up killing because he was tired of hearing the man speak. I mean, it's kind of a little extreme, but anyway, I guess he didn't like him very much, so he killed his own father-in-law and brought the remains of his father. And the Sadian tombs is one of the highlights of our visit to Marrakesh, and I think you should definitely go see it and just see the splendor of the whole place and how the rich people were buried. The tile work, like I said, is just magnificent, and it's got huge pillars, and it's just wow. I mean, it's a nice place to be buried in. The French authorities eventually took over looking after Marrakesh, and it became a French protectorate in 1912. It was something about the Treaty of Fez, and they moved the capital to Rabat. But a lot of the French people loved Marrakesh, and it became like the place for a lot of the French movie stars and actors and celebrities to visit and, have their huge parties, courtesy of the Farsi of Marrakesh, who was like I guess you would call him sort of like the senator or something. But he was just a very corrupt guy who had a hand in everything, including prostitution and drugs and whatever came into Marrakesh. He had a hand, and he had to get his cut. And the French government didn't mind that too much, because they figured as much as he was doing, and as much as it was taking from the government money, he wasn't about to overthrow them or anything like that. So they enjoyed the parties in the palaces, and they brought their stars like Josephine Baker, and even Winston Churchill was a frequent visitor of Marrakesh. And one of the other people that we found out was a great, adopted son of Marrakesh was Yves Saint Laurent. One of the places we went to was the Majorelle Gardens, and it's just a beautiful, peaceful place in the new city, just outside of the Medina. It's got a lovely pond and walking areas. There's like water lilies that remind you of like Monet's house and his artwork, and it's very colorful, done in blues and yellows. And there's a picture of the house on the website nextbiteoflife.com. I have a lot of pictures that accompany this podcast, so you should check it out so you're not lost, and you can definitely get a feel for what I'm saying. And that house is just beautiful, and the original owner was named Majorelle, and he bought this house in the 20s, I believe, and it eventually ended up being owned by Yves Saint Laurent, who was adopted by the city in 1964 along with his partner, and he donated the house to the city. And so the garden is like one of the places that are just open to everyone, and it cost if I remember correctly, it was 5 dinars to get in, so it wasn't very expensive at all. It's just a nice place to hang out for a couple of hours and check it out. And it just makes you feel good to see all this shade, and there were a lot of people, but it's also spacious enough. There's a little tribute to Yves Saint Laurent in the gardens too. One of the other places we visited was the Agdal Gardens. I mean, they're not really gardens. They just, to me, just look like a bunch of open land with palm trees. There's a ton of palm trees in Marrakesh, and they had places. They had camels that you could ride, even though we chose not to, because, well, I was scared for one because the teeth on those things are just very scary. And Fede just like petting them. He didn't want to ride them. He just like petting them, and he wanted to bring one home, which I told him we could not because I don't think the dogs would like that too much. The Menara Gardens are outside of the Medina as well. And like I said, it's the reservoir with the water from the Atlas Mountains. They use it now more for concerts and shows and things like that. And it's just a funny thing. It's just a fun thing to see. What I liked about it is like there's a lot of trees, like a lot of shaded trees. And if you look at the picture where I have the view from the Menara Gardens down to the Kutubia Mosque, it's about a 45-minute walk. And on the weekends, a lot of locals will go and bring their stuff for the picnic and food and, drums and instruments to play. And they actually walk down from the old Medina, dancing, singing on the streets. Like they go before sunrise, and they go and they stay under the shaded trees and have their picnics there. And they go back in the evening after the sun goes down. And that's usually how they spend their weekends. And what I found interesting that the guide told us was that the women and the men actually don't share the same trees. So the men are all under one tree and the women are all under other trees. Even when they're married, you don't spend the time with your spouse. You're with other women or you're with other guys. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. But it was cool because we saw like the younger kids like making out under the trees. Like when we went, probably away from, because it wasn't very busy. So it's a place for them to go and kind of meet, because I would assume that it's still very strict Muslim rules. So you can't go making out with your boyfriend or something. So they always sneak up there and and do what kids do. So that was actually very nice. It's nice to know that kids are the same all over the world. Another place that you should definitely see that's worth looking into is the Ben Youssef Madrasa school. It's an old ancient school of Koran that's now closed, of course. And it was only €1 to get in. All those places that I mentioned are mostly €1 to get in, so it's cheap. You're walking through the Medina and walking through the souks, and it's very hard to find, but you should definitely try and find it. You can ask anybody and they'll tell you where it is. It's an old abandoned school, and the rooms are teeny tiny. It was just for kids to learn the Quran. And the bedrooms, like the rooms are so small, and you can imagine they're empty now, but you can imagine what it was like to have a bed there and all your little things. And it was just, I would say the rooms were probably like 50 feet by 50, no, not even that big. I wouldn't say it was 50 by 50. We were just very small with little tiny windows. And I have a picture of the actual room. You can see it from the outside looking from the courtyard, and you can see the length of the rooms, and the depth was not even as big, as long as the length is. So they were just very small, and it made you feel really claustrophobic. But I guess it really keeps your mind on your studies when you're there. Your only source of light is that little tiny window. So I think I would probably be there all the time trying to get some light, and I wouldn't be studying. But it's good to see anyway. We also visited the old secondary palace called the Bahia Palace. It's no longer being used, so it's empty, which is kind of sad. That one also is it's 10 dinars or €1. 10 dirham, sorry, or €1 to get in. And it's worth seeing just to see like the tile work and the courtyard. It's not as huge as some of the palaces that you're used to, but it's definitely very intricate in its design, and it's just, you can tell that it was, the glory days. You can picture the glory days and see it must have been very, very wonderful to stay there or be rich and actually live there. There are huge fireplaces and so many rooms. We're trying to figure out like who could really, and just imagine there's like everything is built with a central courtyard as the focal point. So basically it's almost like having 4 houses on each side with everything that you could need: a living room, a sitting room, a maid's room, everything, a dining room. It was like a series of 4 houses. So if you get a chance to see that, you should definitely do it, because you can see how the rich people lived in the old times. Now we'll talk about the souk and the Medina and how to shop. It's very interesting. I'll tell you a little backstory. I left for Marrakesh, and I left my luggage in the house. For some reason, my husband thought I had put the suitcase in the car, and I thought he had done the same thing. We had to leave the dogs with the sitter, and so I was all concerned about making sure I had everything: the beds, the food, and I forgot my luggage. So we got to the airport and opened the trunk, and he's like, "Where's your luggage?" And I said, "I thought you had it." And he said, "I thought you had it." So it was too late to go back home to get the bag. So I just said, you know what, the hell with it. Let's just go. So I'll just buy something when we get there. So right off the bat, when we got to the Riyadh, we had to go shopping. So we got there, left his luggage, and then one of the nice people that worked there was actually kind enough to walk us to the souk, because it is so hard to know your way around the Medina unless you know where you're going. So he took us around, and so that was my first occasion to haggle. The first thing I got was a dress, we call it a boo-boo in Nigeria, but they call it something else, and I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, it's just like a kaftan. It's just one dress. And when I asked the guy how much it was, he said it was 250 dirhams, which comes to $25, 25 euros. And I said, no, I wasn't about to pay that. He asked me how much I wanted to pay, and I said 100. And it really pissed me off, because he said, okay. And I just didn't like that, because I felt like I wasn't getting a good deal. I wanted to haggle some more. And it didn't help, because my husband was there saying, well, 10 euros is not bad for a dress. And I'm like, shush, I would haggle with this guy. But it was too late, because he already accepted the price. But talking to the guy who took us to the souk, he said that would have been a price that a Moroccan person would have paid. So I didn't feel too bad about paying the $10. So anyway, the moral of the story is you always want to start your price anywhere from 30 to 40% of the price that they offer you, and then work your way up from there. And make sure you have a price in mind where you're going to stop at, and don't go over that. And if you offer them a price and it's too low, like one instance, I wanted to buy a pair of slippers, and it was handmade, and the guy was making it in his store, and it looked really nice, but he wanted 35 euros for it. And I said 10, of course. And he let me go. He didn't counter offer me because it was too low. So when you don't hear anything back, then it's basically too low, and they won't accept an offer. So just walk away, and you can use that as a starting point or higher for the next place that you go to, which will just be a few doors down, because basically they all sell the same thing. But it's miles and miles of little corners and alleyways, and you will definitely get lost. There is no way you will not get lost. The best thing to do, and what I can tell you, is you want to bring some change along with you, like euro coins and maybe 10 or 25 dinar um, coins, because what you do is basically tell one of the kids that are hanging around that you need to get, to your riad. A lot of the riads will give you like their maps on the back of their business card. Show it to them and they will lead you to your riad, and you just give them, they'll want $2, $3, $4 or $5, but you just tell them in the beginning, look, I'm going to give you €1 and that's it. And make sure you don't go over that no matter what they say, because they always try and squeeze as much as they can out of you. So you don't get there and then give them like €5 bill and they say, I have no change. So give them €1 and be firm about it, and that's it. And they will usually lead you back to your place. One of the things that I loved about Marrakesh was the fresh squeezed orange juice. It's 40 cents a glass, and they're in the souks and in the Medina, and it's just wonderful. It's so refreshing. We had so many glasses of oranges while we were there. They have pomegranate juice too, but I really didn't care for that. Mine was just orange juice every day, every single day. Talk about the food. The food in the Medina is really cool, really nice, really delicious. A lot of seafood, a lot of meat, and the stalls that sell the street food are open in the evenings only. During the day it's empty, and they just it's deserted as far as food. But come sundown, the places are open, and all the stalls and the guys there are just screaming at you, trying to get you to come to their stall to eat, and it can get very overwhelming pretty quickly, and they will try everything in their power to get you to come to them. They kept calling Federico everything from like Bruce Willis to Kojak, because it was bald, all the English words that they know, just to try and get you to come. It's like, oh, remember me, my friend, and they pull at you, and it's the stalls are basically the same thing as far as food, and the prices are very, very much the same. So maybe just look around for a place that has a lot of people sitting down, and just sit down and order what you need to do. But what you should know is that the food are basically like tapper size. They're not like full on plates. So basically you see like, oh, this is only 30 dirhams, which is €3 for like calamari. But it's not like a huge plate. So it adds up quickly. Before you know it, you may find yourself spending like 20, 25 euros for your meal when you shouldn't. So just keep that in mind when you order. We went to a lot of local restaurants and cafes where we saw people eating, and the average meal for us was probably around 227 dirhams, which is like €2.70. And this would be like a sandwich, like a shawarma sandwich with fries and a 500 cc serving of Diet Coke. So it was very cheap to eat. But the thing you need to do is, if you go to a place that doesn't have the menu up and doesn't have the prices, you definitely want to ask them how much it is before you sit down, because once they know that you're a tourist, they will definitely raise the price on you. Like we had the tagine, which is like a bunch of vegetables with a little bit of meat in the middle, and it's really delicious. And it usually, like to a local person, it's probably like €2 if you're lucky. And we went to one place and they wanted like €8 because we were foreigners. And so if you don't ask, you sit down and you eat, and you assume they're going to get the same price, and then they stick you with the bill, and then you're just kind of pissed off. So make sure you check before you eat. That is my advice to you. Definitely make sure you wash everything down with the mint tea that they offer you, because it's just, it's so refreshing. And that's one thing I wish I could really make. Like I wish I could find like actual mint leaves and find the exact tea that they use and make some for myself, because it's just, it's really delicious. Absolutely fantastic. So that's one thing I recommend that you should drink a lot of while you're there. Now I'm going to talk about the Riad that we stayed at. It was called Riad Farhan, and I still can't remember how I found it. I'm just so glad that I did. I was doing my research online, and a lot of the Riads I saw were priced from like 65 euros a night upwards. And I just thought, wow, that's just too much money. I didn't want to spend that much. So somehow I ran into this link, and it was to this Riad. So I booked it, and our cost was 47 euros and change nightly, which was just amazing. It was the lowest price that I saw, so I booked it right away. And it's actually in the old Medina. It's only about a 5 to 10 minute walk to the souks, and it was fantastic. And we got there. I booked a trip from the airport with them because I knew from reading other people's experiences that it was really impossible to find the Riads because they're just this really long, narrow, winding ways. So I booked it, and they picked us up from the hotel. So somebody met us from the Riad outside of the gate of the Medina and walked us through. Getting there, I mean, the Medina, it was just overwhelming. But walking behind this guy, it was like, okay, thank God, we would never have found it by ourselves. He led us into this big courtyard, and the Riad is only 5 rooms, 5 suites actually. There's one on the bottom floor, and there are 4 rooms. So basically think of the house as square, and there's a suite on each side, and they all overlook the courtyard below, which had a little plunge pool. Our room was upstairs, and they had cute little names, and we were in the Sarah suite. And it had a king-size bed. It was awesome. The doors were so magnificent and like reclaimed wood, and it had 2 little chairs to sit and talk. And it had a really nice bathroom with double sink and like water rainfall shower. So we really enjoyed the stay there. And looking down from the room, you could see this little alcoves where we had breakfast every morning, which was included in the price of the hotel. And the breakfast was just wonderful. It was like Moroccan pancakes and this thing that looked like sort of like a Thomas's English muffin is probably the best way, but it was bigger. And they had homemade cakes and bread and yogurt drink, which was awesome. I loved it. And really strong coffee. So that was a really wonderful place to stay, and there was no dining room per se. It was just the little alcoves, and you just sat there. So basically you were forced to say hello to the people that were also staying there. So it was nice because there's no TV in your room. There's pre-Wi-Fi, but there's no TV. And the Riad is only about a month old, so everything is new but was made to look old. So it was very good. You had all the conveniences without all the breakdowns and the smell of the old things. Upstairs, on the top floor, there's an open courtyard that you could just basically hang out, and it's got like little sun beds and umbrella for shade. So that was nice. We didn't get to stay much in there. We were mostly either in the room downstairs or we were walking around in the souk. So I recommend this hotel if you go to Marrakesh. It was definitely worth the price. And I know a lot of people will be concerned about safety in Marrakesh, but I can tell you that there is absolutely no reason to feel unsafe. Even going through at night, going through the alleyways looking for your Riad, once you get your sense of belonging, it's positively safe. Everybody's nice and they say hello to you if you say hello to them. Nobody bothers you. I was more scared of the cats than I was of people because there were a lot of cats everywhere. I mean, I didn't think any place had more cats than Malta, but Marrakesh definitely does. So I wasn't really, that was the only part of the visit that I didn't like very much because I'm just terrified of cats. So don't worry, you're safe. Of course, you need to watch out for your belongings just like everywhere else. You can't just go around flashing your money everywhere and think people are not going to mug you or something. But I wouldn't worry about that at all. So let's see, what else did I want to talk to you about? Oh, do you need a visa to go to Marrakesh? If you're from the US, the UK, EU citizens, you don't need a visa. Everybody else does. You can visit just like every place else for 90 days. And if you need to be longer than that, then you need to get permission. But apart from that, nope. You're free to go. The things I want to advise you about if you're going to Marrakesh and you think you have one of those stomachs that are a little bit wonky, you might want to bring some Imodium with you and maybe even some antibiotics like Cipro or something. See a doctor, get a prescription for it so you have it on hand just in case you need it. I don't think you will. I mean, I had no problem. Fede had a little bit of a problem, but I have an African stomach, pretty strong, so I was fine. Our cost for the trip, we went on a Ryanair flight, and it was 84 euros, 42 euros a person, so it was pretty cheap. We spent 342 euros on the room. Like I said, it was 47 euros a night, and our bill with the hotel came to 342 euros because we had an extra dinner, 2 extra dinners there. We also spent 250 euros total for clothing, shoes for me, and our food. And we spent 50 euros on a tour of the city, going to all those places that I told you about. Basically, we spent a total of like 725 euros for the whole trip, which was very good in my opinion. So I wasn't displeased. I was very happy with that. We didn't go over budget. It was basically what we thought we were going to spend. Anyway, I hope this has given you a little bit of insight as to Marrakesh, and I hope it also makes you want to visit the city, because it's definitely worth it. So thank you for joining me. I'm so glad you did. Once again, you can find all the pictures that go along with the podcast at thenextbiteoflife.com. And I hope to see you on the next podcast. By the way, if you like the podcast and you would like to have it continue, please feel free to leave a review on iTunes or even give me a shout out on the website. Thank you. Talk to you later. Have a good day.